right, guys, thank you so much for being on our IX Global podcast. We are here with us today, Mr. John Tallarico. John, welcome.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you.
And real quick, before we get started, I just kind of want to do a quick intro. For those of you guys that do not know John, he was out in our Awaken Punta Cana with us, had an amazing time out there. And, you know, I told a story from stage, and I kind of want to say on video as well. A lot of people do not realize there's been influential people in my life, in my business life and personal life that have helped me grow. And for those of you guys, if you guys have heard me talk about my mentor, Brian Robert, in the past, but, you know, John Tallarico has been behind the scenes the last 15 years. We've been, you know, great friends. And John was actually the first one that ever really, I think, truly believed in me enough to give me money. And I think that's a big testament, you know, to how much you believe in someone. And so remember, this is back when I was 23, 24 years old, young kid. We met at a business conference in Las Vegas, I think, a seminar, and just got to chatting and just stayed in contact ever since. I know we were just talking yesterday. It's been 13 years since you've been out to Utah. It's been a while before we saw each other in Dominican Republic as well. But I guess what I want everybody listening to know is, you know, John's been influential in my life in behind the scenes, as a mentor, as an investor, as a friend. And so, John, I want to welcome you here today. And you know, I really want to discuss today is kind of, you know, a little bit about you.
Sure.
I see your shirt right there, The Million in You, right? We talk a little bit about that.
Okay.
We got our good friends here, you know, some books here. I really want to focus this on, you know, personal growth, and that journey that people could have. Maybe the journey that you've had, we can throw some stuff in there. So, John, welcome. Thank you for being on with us. And I do appreciate you flying all the way out here to meet us in person.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you very much for having me. Yeah, it's great to be back here in Utah. I can believe it's been 13 years since I was at your wedding. And so I'm super excited, really proud of what you're doing with IX Global and the whole community that you're building. It was an honor to be with you guys in Punta Cana, see all that energy and excitement of what's going on and how you're really innovating and inspiring and impacting people to change the world.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. And I think, you know, in Punta Cana, we'd been obviously working in the background on this, but we had the ability to launch Living the Legacy by Bob Proctor out there. So let's talk a little bit about that, because I know you as well. You're, you know, are very good friends with Bob. You're top 1% consultants in his business coaching business as well. So maybe let's talk a little bit about that. Let's talk about the course. Let's talk about Bob a little bit. I know he's kind of like the godfather, if you will, of more modern day personal development. So absolutely,
Joe. Yeah, Bob Proctor, for those of you who don't know, or those of you who do know, is the greatest teacher, I think, in human success and potential over the last 6 years. For me, I think ever. And what he did was he realized that his way wasn't working. And I think you and I both have been there, Joe. And we said, okay, we threw up the white flag. And so someone gave him a book. That book was Ray Stanford actually gave him a book. Bob was $6,000 in debt and he had $4,000. And so Ray said, read this book, do exactly what I tell you to do. And Bob said, okay. And so obviously the rest is history. Bob went on to, you know, star in The Secret, impacted millions of people around the world, impacted my life. And so, and he studied that book every day for the last 63 years. Unfortunately, he passed away, transitioned about a year and a half ago, but his legacy still lives on. And so the course that we brought to IX Global and that you are sharing with your community is Living the Legacy. And it's really Bob's last course, but it goes into great detail about the 13 principles of success from Think and Grow Rich.
Correct. Yeah, and I've had the opportunity over the last, it's been about 35, 40 days to go through, you know, watch first the movie. And I think that's a great, you know, starting point for people that do not know personal development. I think there's just some really good stories that are told in the movie and really good insights given by, you know, a lot of great, you know, modern day entrepreneurs. And, you know, I've been, you know, got the book here in front of us here and been going over it in our CEO challenge, a group that we started within our company. And it's been eye-opening. It's been probably about a decade since I last picked this book up, right? You start going through all these other books and you get busy with life. And I started thinking when I'm more than 3/4 of the way through the book right now. And I'm like, why have I not read this more? It even says, read this book 3 times, at least 3 times to get the desired results that you're looking for, right? It gives us all the action steps. But the thing that blew my mind away, and you made a comment about this earlier, is like this book, that book right there, your favorite book. These are books that were built, that were written in the beginning of, you know, the 1920s, 1930s. And the principles and the insights in these books still hold true today. And even some of the science has proven these things, because I was thinking, my wife follows Joe Dispenza. We got a book of his on the table.
Right.
And I'm sure a lot of people know who he is. And he talks about the quantum side and the science and all this stuff. But in Outwitting the Devil, in here, Napoleon Hill's talking about hypnotic rhythm. Right. He's talking about manifestation. Yeah. He's talking about tapping into infinite intelligence. And so I just thought it was great. I guess the question I want to give to you is, you know, over your studies with Bob through books, what's your, you told the story about Bob, you know, being, you know, $6,000 in debt. Kind of what's been your journey? I think people get involved and they think, oh, I'm going to read a book and it's going to change my life. Absolutely. It's not, that's the event, but it's a process, right? Yeah,
absolutely, Joe. You touched on so many wonderful things. You're right. Most of us read a book to check it off the list, say we read the book, but we don't actually experience the book. And I've been guilty of doing the same thing, right? I would read a book, we'd go to seminars, say we went there, and yet nothing would really create permanent change. And so my experience was I would do that a lot, right? I would start and stop a lot of things, get excited, and then, but what happened is I didn't really realize that there was an underlying issue, and that was my mental habits.
Yeah.
You know, everything works by law, and you know, in the Bible, right? God created everything, right? Nothing's created or destroyed. It's just a transmutation of energy.
Correct.
And so you mentioned a little bit about the law, certain laws, but there is a law of rhythm, right? There's a law of you talked about the law of attraction. It's actually a secondary law. The main law is the law of vibration, right? Everything has a frequency and a harmony. And so what I realized is through Bob, you know, kind of shaking me up and saying, hey, John, he actually sat me down and said, John, you have a mental problem. And he paused after the word mental. He's like, you don't need to go to the hospital. But he says, you're thinking. Your problem is your thinking. And most people think they have to do something different. Let me just do this next seminar. Let me just do this next book. What Bob said is you have to think different. You have to think differently. And he says success is 95% mindset, 5% strategy. But most people want the sexy strategy. I know with the IX, most people want those nodes. They're very sexy and appealing. They don't want to do the hard work. And so for me, I hit rock bottom, Joe, 2009. I lost everything, kind of was thrown out of where we were staying, had to borrow money to get by. And I went back to what I loved, which was personal development, and knowing that God had me here for a reason. And that I wasn't going to go out like this, you know, living in a motel with my ex-wife at the time and 2 dogs, hanging out at Starbucks every day, seeing the same people, you know. And I went back to that book. And actually, this time I went through it and I actually read it. You know, most people, when I speak from stage now, I'm very blessed to speak all over the world. I ask everyone, how many of you have read Think and Grow Rich? And everyone's hand goes up. Then I ask them, how many of you can list the 6 steps to get rich? Hill gives us the secret in it. And every hand goes down. And so I went back and experienced the book this time, as you're doing right now for these 30 to 40 days.
And I think that's why he says to read it a few times, right? Because there's so many things that he tells you to do that if you just read it once, this is not just a book, this is a manual. Like you got to go back and consult it once in a while and look at it like, okay, what step did I miss here? Did I do this? So there's a lot of action that should be given in here. I think that's where people, like you said, they just check that box off. I read it, let's move on to this next one. It's more modern. And I think that's one of the things too, is it kind of loses its appeal because it's such a, I don't want to say an old book, but it's one of the originals, right? And people start getting, you know, distracted. There's a lot of new science and technology, but the principles are here. And us as humans, we really don't change that much. And we get to travel all over the world. And it's funny because whether it's in Korea or Japan or Latin America or Europe, it's like, oh, they go and tell you like, well, you know, the problem with the people here in this country is they don't really read that much. And, you know, they don't have a culture of reading. They don't have a culture of they don't have a culture of entrepreneurship. That's what I get told all over the world. And it's just the same thing over and over again. But people think just because it's happening in their community, they're the only ones that experience it. But it's human nature. And that's what this book talks about more than anything. And I pointed out to my group this week on the CEO Challenge, Think and Grow Rich. Everything's in the title. Number 1, thinking, the law of vibration. We know thoughts are things, right? They're energy. And growing, it like an acorn doesn't turn into an oak tree overnight. It takes hundreds of years. You know, we as humans, we develop in our mother's womb, takes 9 months, right? Everything has a law to follow, like you said. So you know, in that journey, I know you've been blessed to just work with a lot of great people over the years, celebrities, artists, great mentors, gurus, and I don't know. What is I get, this is more of a personal question. I'm going to throw you off, but
sure,
what are some, you know, kind of give us some great events that have happened. You know, everybody's always looking for that great event that happened in the life that changed Don Tellerico or myself. Did you have one of those events, or multiples, or kind of, let's talk about that a little bit.
I've had many of them. Let me just go back to touch on what you mentioned in the book. It was, there is a law of gestation, right? And so obviously a baby, roughly 9 months, acorn, nobody knows yet, and I think we'll get there eventually, but what is the gestation period for the spiritual seeds that we're planting, right? Which is your goals and dreams. And so that's why it's so important that you stay the course, that you develop that persistence, that daily massive action, you track what you're doing, and then you just, you know, live from the wish fulfilled, right? You see it as it's already done. And most people don't want to do that, Joe, right? Because they want to see it. They want the guarantee, they want the blueprint ahead of time. And that that's not faith, right? That's not relying on faith. Everything works through faith, unwavering faith, in knowing that who you are, and everything works by law. You're absolutely right. I always say, and I kind of joke when I speak, it's not procrastinate and grow rich, right? It's actually think and grow rich. For me, everything changed when I went to a seminar 2013 or 14. It was called the Paradigm Shift. And I'm looking at the order page, and it's like $1,000, which I didn't have at the time. And I'm like reading all these testimonials. Bob Proctor changed my life. This was the best 3 days I've ever went to. Finally found some room on a credit card. I went, and I sat in the back of the room, and I listened to this man, Bob Proctor, talk about this book that he's read every single day for the last, I think back then it was 50 some years. Same book. And he said, if you can change your paradigms, I didn't even know what a paradigm was. Basically a set of habits, you know, the way we get up in the morning, Joe, the amount of money we make, how we network and connect with people, all part of our programming. He said, if you can change your paradigms, you can change your life. And so I sat there and I wrote on a piece of paper, somehow I'm going to be in Bob Proctor's inner circle, have him mentor me and have some kind of great relationship with him. Had no idea how I was going to do it. And I always tell people, you don't need to worry about the how, right? God will fill in the details. But you decide what you want, right? Desire, which is the first step toward riches. It's the first principle in Think and Grow Rich. And so I sat there for 2.5 days listening to Bob Proctor play one song. He played this song called I Can See Clearly Now the Rain Is Gone. It's going to be a bright, bright, sunshiny day. And that was the only darn song Bob played the whole weekend, Joe. It was maddening after a little while. But I got to thinking this song means something to him. And so after the event, I went to Google and I found out the guy was still alive, Johnny Nash. He was a recluse with no social media, no website, nothing. But I was persistent, and I found a phone number through some searching on Google. I called him up. His wife answered. And so Bob was turning 80 years old. And I said, if I send an album, will you have him autograph it to Bob Proctor? He's a huge fan of your husband's. And she said, sure. So bought my $5 on eBay, the album, shipped it. Now, this is where I tell them, when you get that opportunity, you want to make it as easy as possible for the celebrity or person you want to meet. So I had the postage in there to send it back. I had the packaging to send it back. I even included the marker and the tape. I got it back and I framed it. And then I went to Bob Proctor's next event, Joe, and that's where this thing, I call it the committee, kicked in and started talking this nonsense to me. This is stupid. This is dumb. Bob's going to think this is just a silly gift. And I left it at the front desk and I ran to my car. And I left. I just said, please deliver this to Bob's seminar. About an hour later, his son, Brian, called me and said, hunted you down through some friends. Bob, my dad would like you to come back to the event.
Wow.
And so Bob brought the framed album up on stage, Joe, came over to me after and said, I get a lot of things. And he says, this is the nicest thing anyone's ever done for me.
Wow.
I just moved quickly through the end of that story. The November before Bob passed in 2022, I got to visit him at his house in Toronto. His wife, Linda, gave me a tour of his house. And she said, here, Bob, why don't you see this upstairs in their main bathroom? Still think this is a compliment, but next to the toilet on the wall hangs that framed album.
That's awesome.
And so that's it, Joe. I always tell people you're one connection away from changing the trajectory of your whole world. So I did that with Bob Proctor. I did that with very famous rap singer Akon. He's sold 50 million records. Les Brown, Grant Cardone, all kinds of amazing people.
And I just think I never heard that story, first of all. So that's amazing. And I've always kind of wondered, like, how do you make so many connections out there, right? It's just kind of putting yourself out there. And let's talk about that committee first for a second, right? That self-talk that we have within us. I think everybody experiences, no matter what. You know, sometimes we get these little spurts of, call it inspiration, hunches, if you will, that we should do something, these ideas. And it comes to us, like it says in the book, in a flash. Like you don't know where these ideas came from. You're just like, you looked it up, you got the CD, you did all these, you took all this action on it. But where did that, you know, original idea come from? And I think a lot of people, they have those ideas, but then they never act on them.
Right.
And then some of them act on them, and then they never follow through on them. I guess in that sense, you had a little bit of luck because you left it there.
Yes.
And it was something so thoughtful and nice that you got a call back on it.
Yeah.
Right. But it could have gone the other way too, and nothing could ever come of it. So there's a big blessing in that, right?
Yes.
So
I think it's, I always like to say we have these 6 spiritual gifts that God has given us, Joe, our higher mental faculties. And you talked about, we get that, that hit. It's our intuition. That's one of the 6. And that's really God speaking to you. And if you don't act on that within 2 to 3 seconds, the committee, as you mentioned, is going to try to talk you out of it.
Yeah.
And so it's important that you take action and just don't, just trust the process. Trust your intuition. Trust that God is guiding you in the right direction. The committee we talk about, I made this up because this thing will do everything it can to keep you safe. We weren't programmed for success.
Correct.
We were programmed for survival. And so the committee will listen to all the news, negativity, nonsense from things outside, our outside environment, circumstances, and conditions, because that's how we were programmed based on our parents. That's how they were programmed. And it's important that we develop awareness, right? Awareness is really the key to freedom.
Correct.
But the right kind of awareness to know that we can control this thing. It's not easy, Joe. I like to say we go into battle each and every day.
Yes.
Right? Battle the devil, all kinds of other circumstances. We want to learn to live from the inside out. Bob always used to say, upside down, heaven down to you, and inside out, right? Responding to life.
Yeah.
But again, it goes back to knowing what you truly, really want. God will give you whatever you want.
Yeah.
Most of us don't want to take the time to think about what we want.
What do you think has been the most, whether principle, insight, thing that you learned from anybody, could be Bob, that has helped you grow as an entrepreneur?
The number one thing I think for me and everyone, Joe, is self-image. You will never outperform. I will never outperform how I truly, really feel about myself.
Correct.
On the inside.
Yeah.
And for me personally, I used to have this mask of life is perfect. John was a perfect student growing up. I had no connections growing up. I'm the last person who should be able to make all these connections. I grew up in a very poor Flint, Michigan, broken home, and all this nonsense that happened to me. All of us have had stuff happen.
Yeah.
And some people have had worse than others, right? Unbearable things that no child should ever have to endure. And so I learned from, actually it was a book called Psycho-Cybernetics, that we have 2 self-images. It's the one that you project to the outside world. Mine was the perfect student. Life is great. John was never in trouble. But on the inside, here's a kid who started drinking, sneaking alcohol at age 12,
Yeah.
pulling out his hair, eating disorder, all kinds of drug and alcohol issues, and yet nobody knew.
Yeah.
And I was dying on the inside. And so it took me decades, Joe, to finally realize that until I changed that false self-image that had been put there from decades of programming, I was going to keep getting the same results.
Yeah.
So the biggest takeaway is the self-image.
Self-image. How did you start to change that self-image? Like what tip could you give to somebody that's struggling with that mask that they have on, that what advice would you give them right now?
First thing is I would encourage them to get that book, Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz. The second thing I would encourage them is to know that there's hope. You look, no matter what you've been through, I used to say I was like the United Nations of dysfunction and abuse, right? You name it, I've experienced it. So if I can get through it, I know any of you guys can, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter, physical, sexual, any kind of abuse, emotional abuse. So there is hope. The third thing is to recognize that this is a false self-image, and that, for decades, I couldn't even look myself in the mirror, Joe. So maybe some of you are watching right now and you're pretending to everyone else that everything's great, but when you come home, you can't even look yourself in the mirror.
Yeah.
We want to work to help you change that self-image, to know that you're God's highest form of creation, that you were created in his image in pure perfection. And how do we do that? We work on our self-confidence. Yeah. We stand in front of a mirror. There's in Think and Grow Rich, there is a self-confidence formula. 2 minutes a day. For those of you listening right now, if you really want to change your life over the next 30 days, print that out. You can find it on Google. Stand in front of a mirror and read the self-confidence formula. and you'll start to see a shift. And you want to also build an self-image of the person you want to be.
Yeah.
So pick characteristics, pick characteristics of you, Joe, the great leader in the discipline that you have, of Bob Proctor, we were talking earlier about David Goggins, right? About Les Brown, some of these people here, Neville Goddard.
Yeah.
Take those and start to incorporate those into your self-image.
Yeah.
And then when the committee starts to talk, recognize it and then change it quickly. Say, I'm not going to consent to this. I'm not going to listen to this.
Yeah, because you can actually program yourself to not even want to believe in that. You can just say, hey, I'm not going to believe in anything that you're telling me right now. Yeah. Any type of negativity, you can program yourself. Since we're talking about programming, you talked about as you're growing up, we were getting programmed influenced by parents or family or environment. What do you think? What would you say to somebody that's in an environment that's let's call it toxic or not not good environment to grow in? Right. What advice would you give them? I think knowing there's two sides to it. One is just leave the environment, right? In some cases we can do that. In other cases, we might not have that ability. Right.
Well, the first thing is I would encourage you to know that there's always a choice you can make, right? And so thankfully, IX Global has a great community. You have this great product. I know you're encouraging people to also surround themselves with like-minded people.
Correct.
So one, that there is a choice. And that two, I want you to get clear about what is it that you truly, really want. And when you start to do that, you start to realize that maybe you need to clean house, that you have to get yourself out of some personal and professional relationships that are not serving you.
Correct.
And this is about, you, Joe, are the star of your own movie, as I am, right? Everyone's just an extra in your own movie.
Correct.
So if you're going to write a script, let's make sure it's an Academy Award winner, right?
Yeah.
And you get to do that each and every day. So the important thing is to recognize those paradigms, the programming, and then create a new script on a daily basis. How do you do that? Get clear on what you truly, really want, and then you study. You stay plugged into the IX Global community. You read books like Think and Grow Rich, but you don't just read it to read it. You read it for understanding. And then the only way to change those paradigms of programming is through repetition. That's why Bob read that book for 60 years.
Correct.
I read this book, The Power of Awareness, every single day. And so it's a repetition that will help start to change the programming.
And so what I hear there is kind of, the thing that we do in IX and the CEO Challenge is we're tracking our actions, our habits, right? And we've created different categories and trying to make people as well-rounded as possible, because we want people to understand, it's not all about business making money. We get a lot of people in our company, and I always tell them, look, if you're coming into my community, it's either because you're broke and or broke and broken. So you're broke financially and you're broken in either emotionally, spiritually, or mentally, right? So we get a lot of people that are broke and broken, and they want to fix their finances. They want to focus on making money. They want to focus on that, like you said, that 5% strategy, which in IX you could call that the tangible side of, they want to go through and they want to learn Forex, they want to learn crypto, they want to buy nodes, and that makes them money. And that's good because it gives them a little bit of breath. But to me, that's a symptom. The financial problem is a symptom of what's underlying, right? And we talked about my journey earlier, right? Like I all these things would start popping up in my life, these bad habits or addictions or things that I was struggling with, but it's because I had an underlying mental, emotional, and spiritual problem that I had to fix first, right? And so when we start tracking our habits, we start knowing what we're doing, you can really start to gauge yourself to see, am I really, because there's a lot of people say, no, I'm reading the book, but are you understanding the book? Are you taking in the book? Are you living the book? And or you're living the principles? And I think there's a big difference in just saying, yeah, I'm doing it, to really, understanding, living, and learning the principles. So we get those people that are broken. They want to focus on that 5%.
Right.
But the 95% is really the personal development side.
Right.
It's really, how do you make yourself better than you were yesterday?
Right.
And it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to happen with time. And I think that's the grow part, right? It's like it takes time, and a lot of people want instant results in our society. I know you deal a lot with entrepreneurs. You do business coaching.
Yes.
Throughout your what are you see some of the common themes or struggles that different entrepreneurs deal with in creating a business or developing as a person?
Right. Well, lots of great questions, Joe. The first thing is it's not the drugs or alcohol that's a problem. It's John was a problem. Joe was a problem, right? It's our thinking that gets us in trouble. I love, and I'll get to that in a second. But one of my favorite chapters in this book, The Power of Awareness, which I think everyone should read, is The Power of Assumption. You know, the only way to change your life is through your imagination, right? And so in chapter 3 of Power of Assumption, he says, Goddard says, man's chief delusion is his conviction that there are causes other than his own state of consciousness, something that is outside of him, right? Our only issue is what's inside you. So what I see people come to me for is, first of all, the first one is, oh, I want to get out of debt. That's the worst goal you can have, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're focused on that, you're just going to continue to attract that kind of stuff, right? The second thing is, I think most people don't have a goal. They don't have a clearly defined goal, right? They don't have that burning desire. They don't want to take the time to think. They don't want to, most people don't think.
Yeah.
And probably you and I have, maybe spent 1 or 2 minutes thinking. Mental activity does not constitute thinking. It involves you going, sitting in quiet and writing out, what is it I truly, really want to have? The only issue in the world is ignorance. And when I say that word, some people kind of get taken back.
Stand back, yeah. Because
it just means not knowing. Not knowing.
Yeah.
We weren't aware, Joe, that when our parents weren't aware that there is another way.
Yeah.
And what is the other way? It's through knowledge.
Yeah.
Knowledge based on understanding. And how do you get that knowledge? Through study, but studying the right information. And so the first thing I encourage everyone to do, same as it says in chapter 1, is what is it that you truly, really want? What does Joe Martinez want? Not what he thinks he can get. What do you truly, really want? Don't worry about how it's going to happen. And so whether personal or, it doesn't matter, relationship, business, income goals, whatever. First thing I do is have them set a goal. And we go and set what we call C-type goals. Those are things you've never done before. You want to get a car, Joe? You already have cars. You know how to do that, right? There's no growth in that.
Correct.
The purpose of a goal is to cause you to grow, to bring out something inside of you that you didn't even know was there. And so I encourage everyone to write a list of what they would love to have, not worry about how it's going to happen, and then take massive daily action, living from the wish fulfilled, right? Living from the end, as Neville Goddard talks about, because everything's created twice, right? Once in the mind, and then as you manifest it in your physical reality. But imagine now that I believe it's a top rank in your company as a lead ambassador. And I know on our weekly calls, I encourage everyone. They joined your company, and I think without a fail, they all want to hit that top rank. Well, what I have been encouraging them over the course of our weekly calls is to already be an elite ambassador, see themselves as an elite ambassador. An elite ambassador, Joe, does things in a certain way. And so you have to be tracking what you're doing, right? And so it's massive daily action, tracking what you're doing, and then living as the person you wish to become.
Wow. That's a lot, right? And I think it's kind of funny, right? Because you deal with a lot of, traditional businesses and people that might be in the space for a little bit looking for an extra. And I get a lot of people that have never been entrepreneurs, some that have, but it's kind of more of the masses are coming in here and trying to find a way to kind of create a system to duplicate this, right? Because your journey of personal development's been how long? Decades.
Yeah, decades, Joe.
Mine, I'm going on 15 years, right? And I'm still not where I want to be, right? And to those C-level goals, we can still continue to, you achieve one and you got to create another one.
Correct.
And I think people kind of get stuck is like, okay, well, you don't need to get out of debt. You need to make more money.
Correct.
How do we find a way to make an extra $5,000 a month, an extra $10,000 a month? And I want to point this out because this is something I heard Brian say it all the time. I don't even know if he fully really understands it, but when you put that word extra in front of, I want to make $10,000 a month. Okay, well, I want to make $10,000. Can you make $10,000 a month at your job now? Okay, yeah, you can. That's the way it's probably. But if you want to make an extra $10,000 a month, well, is that outside of your job? Is it going to bring you down a different path with a different purpose, with different passions, where you can get out of the rut that you're in? So I like that word extra and everything that we're doing when we're building these financial goals or helping people, because it puts a little bit, it's like, no, you're not limiting yourself from what you have. You're going to add that on top of what you already got. So I want to have my cake and eat it too, type of thing, right? And I think that little word extra, it's been programmed in me that I've said it so many times. I want to make an extra. And in the beginning, I was like, I want to make an extra 10,000. Now I'm like, I want to make an extra million. And I'm like, next I'm like, I want to make an extra 100 million, right? And you just continue to grow and grow because you're never really truly there, right? Because your definite purpose, you might achieve your purpose, what you think it is now, but that's going to change in 5 years. It's going to change in 10 years. As I'm sure, Bob is over his life, it's like, he probably started with one purpose, and he realized like he could have so much of a greater impact in people's lives just doing what he did. So
yeah, it's all about success, Joe. Earl Nightingale, I know you know him. He said success is a progressive realization of a worthy ideal. And so we set these C-type goals, and exactly what happens. You attain them, you achieve them by doing things in a certain way, and you realize, wow, I could have set my goal instead of 1 million to 3 million.
Yeah.
And we start all over again. And then we're gonna have some new paradigms that are gonna creep up, right? The committee's gonna start to creep in and say, well, Joe or John, you just got lucky that time, you can't do it again.
Yeah.
And then we hit, sometimes if you're not careful, you'll hit what Gay Hendricks calls in his book, The Big Leap. You'll hit your upper limit. And guess what happens? You subconsciously start to sabotage yourself.
Yeah.
You will bring in distractions in the form of maybe shiny objects. People come to you and bring you other business opportunities that are not in your zone of genius. And before you know it, you're off doing other things, and you've gotten away with what got you that C-type goal, what got you that $1 million.
Yeah.
Maybe a drag in a relationship that's not the healthiest one for you, which will then take away your attention. So you have to be mindful and be very careful, right? That when you don't hit that upper limit, and that you can continue. This is a school called life, Joe, right?
Yeah.
There's no graduation.
Yes.
It's always about continually learning, and as you said it earlier, improving, being the best you can be each and every day, competing with yourself.
Yeah.
Right?
Let's talk a little bit, because what I hear there when you start, the idea that floated in my mind was legacy, right? We and I talk a lot about this, is, I want to leave a legacy, is leaving something for your posterity, for your future generations, right? And you start to really think about it, like you look at all the elite in the world, or the billionaires out there, and they say, the poor, they're living day to day.
Right.
Right. Like down in Latin America, you've been down there, Rosemary's from Peru. We see what it's like to live like day to day. Yet they have to go get bread for that day. They can only buy for that day. They don't have a refrigerator full of food. Here in the US, we're living paycheck to paycheck, right? And then you have, let's call them the rich or the elite. They're thinking 5 generations, 10 generations down the line. You look at like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or Richard Branson, these guys out there, they're like, how do we get to Mars? How do we become interplanetary, species? And they're thinking that's not going to happen today. That might take 200, 300, 400 years. And it may never happen either. It could just be a pie in the sky dream, but they're going after it and they're thinking down the road. And what would you say to, how do you expand that thinking? I think that's the main key, is like, how do we stop to look at what's hurting me in this moment? Because we have pain that hurts us in the moment. How do we look past that pain? How do we look past that hunger even, right? From using that example of food, how do we look past that and really look, maybe 50 years down the road, 100 years down the road, that legacy? And that's what Bob talks about, is it's living the legacy. And, how do we go and create that legacy? It's by thinking further down the road than the person next to us.
Matt. No, great question, Joe. And I know you want to leave a legacy for your children, as I do with mine, something so that they don't have to go through what you and I had to go through. I'm grateful to be staying here with you guys, and I saw your affirmation sheet in your kitchen that you do with your kids. I do the same with my son and my daughter when I can.
Yeah.
And it's instilling in them the belief that they are unstoppable and unlimited, and what they can be, what they can do, and what they can have. And so it all starts with, you mentioned going to Mars and all that, Elon Musk and all that. It was from dissatisfaction. That is the greatest motivator on the planet. You got your phone there because someone was dissatisfied. We're sitting here talking. I flew here in a steel tube, right? Because somebody was dissatisfied with the way things were. And it all starts with what? Warner Von Braun said this to John F. Kennedy when he said, what's it going to take to get us to the moon? He said 5 simple words, right? The will to do it. Had no idea how we were going to do it. But the laws of the universe, we talked about everything works by law earlier, are so precise that we were able to land somebody on that moon within the fraction of a second. And so imagine now if you actually apply that same strategy to your goals and dreams and building your legacy. And I'll go back again to, but what is your legacy? What do you want it to be? That requires
to
people
define that first.
To define it, right? And so a lot of people will use their circumstances, right? You mentioned people in other countries that live day to day. But what if they get just a glimpse of this information? What if they find someone, one of your community members on your call is out in a rural village in India, very remote village, but somehow he just got a glimmer of hope, right? It just takes a little bit of a hope. And that's what you're doing here. That's what I love about IX and the community you're building all over the world. bringing in the information from Living the Legacy to give them the right kind of information to know that regardless of their circumstances, whether they're living day to day right now or whether they're living paycheck to paycheck, there is another way. And that just requires a decision. Yeah.
Dissatisfaction, and it's that pain that we go through. That's a great motivator, right? I think Tony Robbins says it, right? There's, pain or pleasure, right? Those are the two things that are going to make you move and wake up. And I think that's where I see a lot of people like come to me like, oh, well, I got to get out of this debt. I'm not making enough money. It's okay. Yeah, that's the pain. It's going to motivate you for right now, but long term, where do you see yourself down the road, right? Because that pain can go away really quick, and then you lose it all over again because there's no longevity in getting. You get rid of pain, you cut yourself, it goes. You put a Band-Aid on it, it hurts for 10 minutes, goes away. You forget about it for a few days, and you're healed. So you forgot about the wound that you had there. The pain is going to motivate you short term. Legacy, purpose are going to motivate you to do the things that you don't want to do when you need to do them every single day. And I think creating a legacy is something that everybody should go out and try to do, because we just want to leave this world a better place for our kids.
Absolutely.
And I know, one of the things you talked about, the affirmations with the kids, I think let's talk about that real quick. What are some things that parents can do? And I know, for example, I showed you, we just recently got Luciana and said they're barely, becoming avid readers. And I don't, they got some great, school books and stuff, but I was like, man, if I could get Luciana to read this book at this age, or Sebastian, like, what is their life going to be like, right? Imagine if we would have read this when we were younger instead of reading it when we were 25, 30 years old, what would have happened? So I guess, what are some of the things that we could do as parents to help our children, right, as well, become productive and extend that legacy beyond themselves as well?
Great question, Joe. And I think it goes back to what I said earlier, our self-image. When I started this exercise, and all you parents can do this starting today, right, with your kids, I picked my son up, put him on the counter in the bathroom, and I have him look himself in the eye. And when we started this exercise a couple months ago, he would look down. I could tell it was very awkward. And I would say things like, repeat after me. I'm smart, I'm strong, I'm brave. And he says, I'm not brave. And that just broke my heart, Joe. And nobody ever did this with me. I'm sure they didn't do it with you.
Nope.
And so guess what happens now? Fast forward 2 months. And last night he says, Daddy, did we remember to do our affirmations today? So you parents, it's as simple as just taking some time. I know stuff is always happening. We're busy, but 30 seconds a day, put your child in front of a mirror and repeat after me, right? I'm smart, I'm strong, I love myself. I'm a great friend. I love my family. I love my things, my friends. I'm unstoppable. I'm awesome. I can do anything. And I'm going to have a great day. And then just continue to do that with them. The other thing is, who says you can't play these audiobooks and have them listen to things like Think and Grow Rich? You bought that book for Luciana. So get them to read these kind of books. Read the books with them. Stop letting them binge out on YouTube and whatever this mini box or lanky box and all these and Ryan and whatever his world is, and expose them to this kind of world.
And it'll be hard at first. Because I remember when we were trying, like you said with your son, it's awkward. They don't want to sit still. They don't want to do it. But it might take, it's you as the adult, you as a parent, it takes probably that 21 days to create that habit. But then they expect it from you now. And if you don't do it, they're like, well, what's wrong, right? And so, some of the things that we've done is, Rosemary has that affirmation board when they're eating breakfast. They go through that. We do like our evening routine. We do family prayer, tuck them in. Rosemary sings them a church hymn every night. And if they don't have their song, they can't go to sleep. And so if they don't have their prayer, they won't go to sleep. Some of the things that we do on a weekly basis as well, we do something called Family Home Evening. We take, it's not that long, 20, 30 minutes. And it's hard at first, and the kids won't want to sit still. But we do kind of like a spiritual lesson, or it could be a lesson on business or a lesson on life or anything. Just have a conversation. We do like a small activity, so they'll get to play a game. That's the part they like most. And then like some type of treat. Rosemary, it'll be either family dinner or they'll have a dessert or something. But I think taking that time to connect. And I talked about this yesterday. I know you weren't on yesterday's call with us, but the mastermind principle in Think and Grow Rich. It talks about putting two minds in harmony, right? And who's to say that that mind can't be your kid?
Correct.
Right? or your spouse or your partner, whoever. They're talking about it in business sense here, right? In creating in money, but that you can use that same principle and mastermind with your loved one, with your kid, and connect with them, put your mind in harmony. I think that was the biggest thing that I took away from this book this week, is like that mastermind principle of being in harmony with those around you.
Absolutely, Joe. Yeah, where two or more are gathered is a mastermind, right? Yeah. And so I learned so much from my son and my daughter. My daughter's almost 8. My son is 6.5. But just imagination.
Yeah.
They don't know the word, it can't be done.
Yeah.
And so I've learned to lighten up a little bit, right? And loosen up and to start to dream again. You know, they just look at things and they have all these big dreams and nothing can stop them. The other thing I would encourage parents to do is maybe you write out a gratitude list or even talk it out with your kids, right?
Yeah.
Just start with a couple things. Let's talk about what we're grateful for today, right? I'm grateful that I woke up today. I'm grateful for mommy and daddy. I'm grateful for my brother and sister. And so you can also work on gratitude. But yeah, the fact that you're doing this with your kids now, Joe, and those you listening,
and that's what the hope is, right? They're listening, that they'll start pick up 1 or 2 of these things, and implement one, and do it. That's it.
Yeah, it's sometimes you try to overload them, right? Just change 1 or 2 habits at a time.
Yeah.
And then it's sharing the right kind of information to them and spending that quality time, right? It's doing the things, and you mentioned earlier, like people like Elon Musk and all those, the leaders and the people like you that are leading a new way, Joe, to impact and change the world. They're willing to do things other people don't want to do. There's only 2 questions people need to ask. Am I willing to do what I really want?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Someone's probably either done it or is doing it. Second question is, am I willing to do what it takes? And this is where the excuses start to pour in. And I hear it all the time from my clients, Joe, right? John, you don't understand. I'm a single mom. I have 3 kids. I have 2 jobs, and all the stories. But guess what? Willing to do the things other people don't want to do. Getting up at 30 minutes earlier, staying up later, studying, taking extra class, just doing the other things. And that's what you do, Joe. I know you're relentless in your pursuit of excellence and what you're doing. And that's what makes you truly a great leader.
Thank you. Thank you. That mastermind really hit home for me this week. And I think, like, to me, being able to take that to my kids is something that I want to truly do. And that's why, we got, different, I told Rosemary, I was like, babe, we need to find something. So we've been, looking all over. This is like a Think and Grow Rich for kids, like comic style. We order them a lot of other books instead of them reading, funny stories or fairy tale stuff, which is fine. They can still read, stuff for enjoyment and entertainment. But I think the biggest thing that we can do to create a legacy is to protect our family unit and to educate them correctly.
Yes.
And education is not sending them to school to learn. They have to learn to read and write and do those things, but they need to be educated at home.
Absolutely.
Our kids are being raised by a system that is programmed to make a cookie cutter type of person, and not let them think outside the box. And you talked about imagination with your kid. They do not. There's the things that they make up. I'm like, whoa, that's actually a really good idea sometimes.
Yes.
Like, how can we make money off of that? But one of the things you also hit on is when that's all happening, I realize that sometimes me as a parent, I miss out on those moments, not being able. That's why masterminding hit me so much. Is like, what could I be doing for my kids to create that legacy? Because I'm so busy on this thing.
Yes.
I'm so sucked into what's happening right now. What are some of the things that, from your clients or just even yourself in general, how can we find a better balance, right? I think we talked about waking up. We can do the things that are necessary, but how do we find that better balance between work and our goals or our kids or family?
Yeah. One of the things that we do in our coaching program, Joe, is we have people print out the Wheel of Life. You can find it online. There's all kinds of stuff. And we look at those 8 to 10 areas of your life and really rate yourself. How are you doing? Because the important thing is balance, right? Some of us have 10s in our business and finances, yet our family suffers.
Yeah.
And so the important thing is to find balance, to make sure that you're spending time with your kids, because before you know it, they're going to grow up and they're not going to want to have dad around and play fight and even sleep overnight, sleep over with you and all this stuff. We have, and you mentioned the book earlier, Outwitting the Devil, we have become majority of people drifters, drifting through life. And in that book, Napoleon Hill interviews the devil, and he shares with him how he keeps society drifting, as he calls it, where they don't have any thoughts of their own, that they're just following the masses. One of those ways, Joe, is social media. And I've been guilty of it myself. I have my son with me and my daughter, and I catch myself scrolling through nonsense.
That's where the awareness kicks in, though.
That's when the awareness kicks in. It's like, what am I doing, right? And so it is like a drug. We become that drive-through society, right? You know, weed, WhatsApp, whiskey, whatever, you name it, right? And we want the quick fix. It's gotten so bad, you'll go to Starbucks or In-N-Out Burger, and there'll be 30, 40 cars deep, and you can walk in, get out of your car, and be gone in 2 minutes. And so it's that complacency, but it's the drifting through life. And so how do you not drift through life? You know that you are fully in charge. You know that you are setting goals. You are using the principles of the mastermind. You are actually studying the right information, that you are prioritizing and balancing each area of your life. I know you're doing the 90-day challenge in mind, body, and spirit and business, which is phenomenal. And I think that's what more people need to take time to do, is to get in touch with those different areas, making sure that they are prioritizing what's important, right? Family first. And then taking action every day. And
it kind of sucks that you kind of have to, in the beginning, you're gonna feel really bad, because you're gonna have to put it on a list, if that's the way your list or checklist or task or whatever. I had to do this. One of the things that I learned was, like, I put an alarm on my phone every single day. iPhones, you can put multiple alarms, and it was, okay, my gym's on there, you know, but 6:15 p.m. family time, just 15 minutes. I'm gonna go up. I'm gonna leave my phone downstairs. I'm not perfect at this, but this is, this is me talking perfectly. 6:15. I'm gonna go find my kids. We're gonna wrestle. We're gonna do whatever they want. We're gonna do some type of activity that they want to do. Watch a show with them, read a book with them, Lucy, cook with them, eat, whatever it is. And that, just taking that time, for me, it recharges me, right? And it lets me go longer in what I want to do. And so sometimes we look at these things as like, oh, I don't want to say this for my kids, but like, oh, I have to give this time to my kid. I don't have enough time, because you do have enough time. You just have to have the intention that you want to get it done, and somehow, some way, you're going to make it done, right?
Absolutely, Joe. People talk a lot about time management, right? You can't manage time. We got 86,400 today. I don't think I got any extra for being in Utah. It's activity management. What are you doing within that time? So managing your activities, that's a great idea. What if you actually set an alarm for yourself and to remind yourself to look at your goal, to look at your dream, and maybe even write it out every couple of hours, and just pause for a minute and actually get in tune and get in touch with what you're doing, right? What is your goal?
Just a me time, a me time alarm, and you can take 15 minutes, whether that's meditation, whether that's journaling, because that helps you, get the creative, and all these things are going to bring and cultivate your imagination, creativity. And then you're going to have one of those little sparks of, inspiration. You might have the next great idea, maybe figure out how to get to Mars sooner.
You mentioned earlier, Joe, about school, and I want to make sure we touch on that. The system is broken, right? We get told, the kids get told, stop daydreaming, right? They're using their imagination. School doesn't give us ways to think. It gives us information that if you remember it on a certain day, okay, Joe, this is how smart you are, and you should be a doctor, or you should, go and, do whatever you're going to do, be a lifeguard. School doesn't give us the right kind of information, right? And so it's important that we expose our children to the different kind of information that will actually help them think, to know that they can think and grow rich. It's not, and my company is $1 million in you. It's not necessarily about $1 million. It's about those million different ideas that reside in each and every one of you. And just pick one, because you have a unique gift. There's nobody else like you on the planet, Joe, right? Definitely. And so there's something inside of you that you're here to do. And you're doing it right now. In this short amount of time, 3 years, what you've accomplished and done is just, it's disrupting the industry and actually helping so many people's lives all over the world.
And I want to just, I'm not trying to poke fun at the traditional schooling system, but look what's going on here in the US right now. The government's, there's a big push to cancel student debt. You have these people out there, they're, my age, we were told to get good grades and go to school. But that entails getting, $30,000, $50,000, $100,000 in debt. So when you're at your starting point of your adulthood, you're starting off in the negative. Now you're going to be working the next 10 years to pay off that debt. And I just think it's such a broken system, and it's so unfortunate that that's happening today and age. But
no, I encourage my kids, I'm sure you do, Joe, to pursue entrepreneurship, right? To pursue. And one thing that most people I think forget is that they control their finances. The money doesn't come from the company, it comes through the company, right? And supply is infinite and unlimited. And most people don't believe that because they can't see it. And that's where I'll go back to that unwavering faith. A burning desire combined with unwavering faith, and you become unstoppable. You can have whatever you want.
Yeah. Well, we're coming up towards the end here, and I know we could probably sit here all day
long
and record this, but I don't know if people would actually follow us all day. But number one, I want to say I appreciate you. Thank you for coming out here. Thank you for helping me out in the beginning and helping me grow. It's because of the belief you had in me in the beginning, has having a ripple effect in thousands of people's lives right now. So thank you. If you guys see John out there, thank him. If he's at some of our events, thank him. Where do you see the industry of personal growth, self-help, personal development going? I know there's like a lot of new sciences coming in, and like a lot of stuff that's been proving out a lot of these principles, but kind of where do you see it going, and what are the best things that people can do to start their personal development journey?
No, great. You're right, Joe. There's a lot of new stuff about the quantum field and quantum physics. Dr. Joe Dispenza, Bruce Lipton, Greg Braden, those three, I follow all of them. I love Michael Beckwith. I think, there's no new information, right? And yet what is happening now is we're discovering more and more how miraculous and marvelous the human body, the human mind, the brain is. So where I see it going is actually taking the stuff that has been around forever, right? This book, Power of Awareness, Science of Getting Rich, written in early 1900s, and applying that to knowing that they are unstoppable, that people are unlimited in what they can be, do, and have. That no longer do they have to be prisoner to them circumstances, but that they now can create. And it's reinforcing that self-image of somebody who is unstoppable, that is fully confident and courageous and moving with calmness through life, that they can really write down what they want. And those thoughts can become things. And I think it's coming back to a greater belief, right? It's not merely, as there's this quote in there, and Napoleon Hill says, the state of mind must be believed, not merely simply wishing and hoping. People wish and hope. They wish and hope as they drive by the highway, they're going to win that lottery and go spend money. But they won't believe that they are already financially free and financially abundant. And so I think where it's going is more of creating a self-image and a belief system that actually each person can actually create their own destiny and their legacy.
What do you think would be the best way to create that?
I think it is through the awareness to recognize who we are as a person, right? Who you are, Joe. We are a spiritual being that has been given an intellect and a physical body. And we're not, you're not your name, Joe.
Yeah, exactly.
I changed your name on Zoom the other day, I think in one of the classes we had. You're not this body, Joe. You moved into this body. You're going to move out of this body. Who you are is a spiritual being, right? Your spiritual DNA is perfect.
Correct.
And you have been gifted an intellect, the ability to reason, the ability to think, the ability to use an imagination, the ability to have a change in perception, right? Nothing's either good or bad, big or small. It's how you perceive it to be. You have a memory to know that if you start to think differently, you're going to train your memory to see different results in your life. And then you have the will, your willpower, right? The ability to focus. I think that's where I see more emphasis going, is creating and helping people establish greater willpower, knowing that they can focus on one thing at a time. I know everyone loves to say that I'm a multitasker. No, you can only work on one thing at a time.
Yep.
Using the power of their will. And then the greatest gift we've been gifted, our imagination, dreaming again.
Yep. Yeah. And that's, I was reading this, and it, talks about finding the secret within these pages, right?
Correct.
For me, I found my secret reading it this time around, and I found my secret to success. Like, I know why I'm successful, but I didn't realize the reason that I was so successful and the things that I had done until I was kind of putting the dots together with the teachings from this book. So I would say, guys, get out there. If you haven't picked up any book ever, to go in and not just, like John said, not just read it, but mark it up, put notes in it, highlight it, like you know, like exactly, you know, you guys can't see it, but it's highlighted, circled, underlined, there's notes in it, pages are folded up. That's what the book needs to be like. It's not just read it and okay, I'm going to put it back on the shelf. It's going to collect dust now. Go out there. This is a journey of personal development. It is a journey. It's not going to, you know, happen overnight. You're going to grow into the person that you want to become.
Absolutely.
But personal development can change your life. Find a system that works for you. Find a mentor, a coach, a friend, a support system that can go out there and support you through your journey.
Absolutely, Joe. And one last thing I'll leave with is to make sure that you're holding yourself accountable, right? I really believe that's your insurance policy to success. Get an accountability partner, right? Find someone here in the IX community and ask them to hold you accountable, that you check in with them. It can be as simply as a text saying, hey, Joe, I read the chapter today. I watched the first principle of living the legacy. And so get that accountability partner. And then, get moving. The train is leaving the station, Joe. Let's go. There's no time to waste.
It's faith in action.
Yes.
Get ready, guys. So that's it, guys. Thank you, John, for being out here with us.
Thank you, Joe.
Appreciate you guys. Hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. And we'll see you guys on the next one. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Joe.